Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, and we will continue where we left off yesterday in the book Rome and Civil Liberty by James A. Wiley. We're getting a Protestant understanding here at Inquisition Update, and we're seeing how England combated Romanism. Protestant England attempting, well, in this case particularly, to raise the illiteracy rate and the ability of Roman Catholic Ireland to sustain itself. And the purpose of the process by which England hoped to raise up the ignorant Irish was to establish the Queen's colleges. They would focus mainly on secular learning, science, mathematics, history, the arts, and improve the quality of life in Ireland for Irish Roman Catholics, to make them, well, rise above their beggarly status and teach them how to feed themselves. And Rome answered through the Roman Catholic hierarchy in Ireland to create an organization called the Poor School Committee. Now, this Poor School Committee was about appointing ecclesiastical inspectors to go around the existing Roman Catholic schools and to see to it that only those who were trained in Roman Catholic canon law and the dogmas of the Roman Catholic Church would be fit to become teachers in the Irish schools. And this would guarantee that Ireland would not rise above its beggarly status, would not learn a secular education, but would be thrown even deeper into Roman Catholic superstition and ignorance. So this committee was formed. They went about inspecting the schools, and they were making awards and scholarships for those who excelled in their religious learning in those schools. So this had the effect of putting all the emphasis of the students upon their religious learning, and thus minimizing the benefit of studying in the arts. And so Ireland made every attempt to maintain the ignorance of its citizens, to maintain its superstitious obligation to its priests. And this is how it was conducted, through the Poor School Committee. Now, he says the above is a plan. We're beginning on the last full paragraph on page 134, if you're following along. He says the above is a plan professedly for extending the blessings of education, but really for guarding against its dangers. It contemplates two objectives. The first is the children of the poor, to whom our ragged schools and our charities are now open, and who have begun to frequent them and to acquire in them the elements of at least an ordinary education. But even this small portion of light, the church, that is the Roman Catholic Church, finds to be frequently fatal to the quote-unquote faith and piety of the child. Okay, Romanism looks at the secular schools, the existing schools for the poor, as being detrimental, if not fatal, to the faith and piety, in other words, the Roman Catholicity of the child. Roman Catholicism was in jeopardy even by these poor schools that were teaching secular learning. He says these other schools then must be opened, and the Romanist youth locked up in them, along with as many Protestant children as can be induced to attend. All right, these Roman Catholic schools, they're going to emphasize enrollment in these Roman Catholic schools to take away students from the secular schools. And he says their religious training is to be made the main business of the school. In Roman Catholicism, religious training is the main area of study in Roman Catholic schools. And he says, and we all know what that means. And I'll tell you what it means. It means that every Roman Catholic or every Protestant who was brought up in a Roman Catholic school is taught Roman Catholic canon law. And under Roman Catholic canon law, it is taught that the Pope is the supreme ruler of the world. And besides that, he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and no government is legitimate unless it is subservient to the papacy. Okay? So one's national loyalty is divided between the nation in which he lives and the Pope who is supposed to rule that government. All right? And then at a moment's notice, whenever that government no longer serves the papacy according to the papacy's interpretation of it, then that citizen is to become an ally of the Pope against his government. Okay, Roman Catholic canon law is taught. It's also taught that the Pope, that they are all individually reliant upon the Pope for the remission of their sins, because it is the power of the Pope that is manifest in the breast of the priest to whom they confess all their sins, and from whom they receive all absolution from sin. So that's what's taught in Roman Catholic canon law. That's what's taught in Roman Catholic schools, besides the Rosary and the Ave Maria and the deification of the priests and the Mass and apparitions and Mary and purgatory and all the other abominations. This is first and foremost in paramount importance in a Roman Catholic education. And so now they're going to award and reward students for achieving excellence in their Roman Catholic education. And they're trying to draw as many Protestant children of the poor, Protestant children, into these schools. So they're going to make them affordable, right? And guess who's going to pay? Well, guess who pays in every Roman Catholic country? The citizenry, through the government. The government collects taxes from the people, and in a Roman Catholic country, that tax dollar is used to support the Roman Catholic education system. So, those Protestant children and the parents of those Protestant children will pay taxes to erect and to pay teachers that teach Roman Catholic canon law. See, it becomes the established church. It becomes the established religion in the country. And the equivalent of what we see here in Ireland is visible on the ground here in the United States in the parochial school system. That's what it's about. It teaches Roman Catholic canon law and Roman Catholic dependence upon the Roman Catholic Church. So he says it is a contrivance brought to perfection by the Jesuits, not for strengthening, but for emasculating the mind, not for communicating knowledge, but for shutting it out. We can study this curious art as it is in operation on a large scale abroad. Italy has been enjoying for ages the blessings of this kind of education and has profited so vastly under it that she now knows how not to read. Okay? It's such a championed education system that the Italian children are illiterate. Okay, in a Roman Catholic education, it's the first and foremost priority is not to learn to read, because if you learn to read, you're liable to read something that is contrary to Roman Catholic teaching. You're just taught to be good little Roman Catholics. All right? So, again, he says Italy has been enjoying this Jesuit style of education and has profited so vastly under it that she knows not how to read. and the only schooling which the youth of her common people know and now enjoy. Excuse me. Let me start over. The only schooling which the youth of her common people now enjoy is to learn under sacerdotal pedagogues, that is, priestly teachers who are very authoritarian, okay? Sacerdotal, that is, priestly pedagogues who are, domineering teachers. They teach their their catechism filled only with questions touching the mystery of transubstantiation, the glory of Mary, and the benefits of confession. Okay? So this confirms what I said before. This is what is taught in Roman Catholic education systems. The catechism, the mystery of transubstantiation, how the priest at a word can change the wafer, the sacrificial wafer, the host it's called, into the literal blood, body, soul, and divinity of Christ, and then to offer him again on the altar of the Roman Catholic Church as another sacrifice, a salvific sacrifice, a sacrifice wherein grace is infused into the participant. Okay? This is abomination. Also, the glory of Mary. They deify Mary. She is a co-redeemer with Christ in the Roman Catholic school. And also the benefits of confession. Obviously, Rome can't gather intelligence unless the confessional box is very busy. This is what's taught in Roman Catholic schools. This is what's taught in the parochial schools of the United States. See, Rome is the same in this country as it was in England and Ireland at the time of the writing of this book. He says they are never permitted, if their parents can help it, to endanger their souls by meddling with knowledge of a mere terrestrial kind. Okay? Secular learning in a Roman Catholic country is a danger to the Roman Catholic Church. You can see why. To teach people to think for themselves, to teach people to read. That's a danger to the Roman Catholic Church. This is why we say whenever you take a look at a Roman Catholic country, you look at an ignorant country where secular learning is not prized, but ecclesiastical learning is prized and rewarded. And he says the peculiar merits of this system of tuition, or this system of education, have been pretty well developed in those schools in our own country, which are entirely under the control of the priests. He says a dozen years ago, we had a few specimens of mental progress from St. Mary's Catholic School in Edinburgh. These were truly of no ordinary kind. Now listen to how he describes these pupils from these Roman Catholic schools. He says in 5 years, the pupil could tell his letters. In other words, after 5 years of education, he could finally recite the alphabet. Okay? In 7, he was able to put his letters together, in other words, to write. In 12 years, he had mastered the art of reading. You can imagine his reading was the catechism. And it says in 20 or so years, he might be able to begin the science of arithmetic. Okay? And by any standard of education, this is failure. All right? Imagine 20 years of education and now finally able to advance to the study of arithmetic. He says this is a specimen of an education, quote, up to the mark of modern demand and yet solid in faith and piety, unquote. So that's Rome's standard. Now you can bet if it took 20 years for these people to learn how to read and write and communicate, how expert they might be in those 20 years in Roman Catholic canon law, Roman Catholic superstition and dogma. Okay? The Roman Catholic schools don't produce Irish. They don't produce Englishmen. They don't produce Americans. They produce papists. And the best Roman Catholic education is gained at a Jesuit institution of learning, whether that be a high school or a college or a university. There's 128 of them here in this United States alone. And what do you think they teach in the Jesuit schools? Well, it ought to be enlightening for you to learn that the graduates of these Jesuit institutions of learning wind up being the most powerful people in our government. That's who runs Washington, D.C. The Jesuits run Washington, D.C. And that ought to mean something to my listeners. If you've been listening to this program and following along in this book and are able to comprehend what James A. Wiley is trying to tell us, and my explanation is as lame as it is, you can come to no other conclusion. This country has become Roman Catholic. At least the head of our government is Roman Catholic. And the laws that are passed by these Roman Catholic powerhouses in Washington, D.C. are Roman Catholic canon law. All right, he says, we do not wonder that the church, that is the Roman Catholic Church, is exceedingly enamored of this mode of education. It is the true way of training subjects of canon law. To every congregation, a school must be attached. All right, to every body of Roman Catholics, a school must be attached. Now, I live nearby a city in Iowa that can only be regarded as a Roman Catholic town. Okay, it's named after one of the Jesuit founders of this country. And in it, they have the great big Roman Catholic Church, and attached to it an entire education system. Roman Catholic from stem to stern. Okay? And this is just a standard mode of operation of the Roman Catholic Church. Whenever a Roman Catholic congregation is assembled, the first thing they do is to institute a school to educate the children in Roman Catholicism. Now, he says, it is the true way of training subjects of canon law. To every congregation, a school must be attached. That's priority one when a group of Roman Catholic families establishes a congregation within a neighborhood or a society. First thing they do is erect a school. Indeed, says the Fathers, wherever there may seem to be an opening for a new mission, we should prefer the erection of a school so arranged as to serve temporarily for a chapel to that of a church without one. In other words, build the school first. We can use the school for church services, but first and foremost, the priority is to educate our children in Roman Catholic canon law. And then, once the school is up and running, and Roman Catholic indoctrination is all running smoothly for the children, on Sundays we'll get together and say the Mass, and then when money comes about, when we prosper, then maybe we'll build a big church. Okay? So especially in a new land, and we can take for instance the United States of America. Early in its founding, it was considered by the Roman Catholic Church to be a mission field. So the first thing they did was start erecting schools. Not churches, schools. And of course, in the colonial period, the practice of Roman Catholicism was was not permitted. There were the same prohibitions against Roman Catholic churches as there was in England. Okay, so what did they do? They built schools. And whenever they were accused of practicing their satanic faith, for lack of a better term, they simply said, well, this is a school to educate our children. Okay, but that's where Roman Catholicism was practiced, undercover. Again, he says, to every congregation, a school must be attached. Indeed, say the fathers, wherever there may seem to be an opening for a mission, we should prefer the erection of a school so arranged as to serve temporarily for a chapel, okay, to that of a church without one. In other words, a church without a school. In other words, don't build a church first so we can get together for services and have no place to train our children in Roman Catholic canon law. First, build the school. We'll use the school while it's training our children in Roman Catholic canon law. We'll use the school as a church until we can afford to build a proper sanctuary for the host. Okay, now you can see the priority that Rome places on an early Roman Catholic education for its children. What is our, just taking advantage of what our Bible tells us, raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, Rome doesn't want anybody departing from the faith, so they teach Roman Catholic dogma and superstition from cradle to grave. All right, the priority is the school. And it says the fathers know very well what they are about. They wish to be beforehand with a national system of education. They wish to have their schools built, to have them filled with the youth of our own communion, that is Protestants, and of their own communion, Roman Catholicism, and of others also, if they can lure them thither. All right, so Protestants are welcome as long as they receive a Roman Catholic education. And he says, then to have their own inspectors appointed, and so an excuse for shutting out government inspector and for being left at liberty to manage or mismanage the business of education in any way they please. So they build these schools and give them a color of religious education, and then when the state inspector comes, that inspector of education related to the state, when they come to inspect, the priest literally comes to the door and says, no, this is a religious institution. Church and state are separate in this country. You don't have any authority to walk into this Roman Catholic school and inspect it. We maintain our own standards here. Okay, so the state has to turn about face and retreat. And they're not allowed to go in and inspect the schools and come to any kind of assessment whether the school is teaching nationalistic education, making the children loyal to the state, and therefore unable to recognize the threat that these children may soon become to the state should the state ever disobey the Pope. Okay, so the state is unable to come into these Roman Catholic schools and find out that what is taught in these Roman Catholic schools is not loyalty to the state or loyalty to the nation. It teaches loyalty to the Pope. All right, so now once the door is closed to the state, then the priests can do as they please. They're autonomous. And boy, what has turned up in the news in the last 10 or 20 years about the goings-on in these Roman Catholic schools. Pedophilia on a global scale. It's not just for teaching Roman Catholic canon law. We'll be back right after these messages. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. Back from the break, you're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you'd like to support Inquisition Update, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors it. And if you'd like to contact me, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. Now, after these Roman Catholic parochial schools are established, when the state inspector comes to inspect, they're turned away under the guise of separation of church and state. The state is not allowed to inspect a religious school in a Roman Catholic country. Just not allowed to do it. Rome believes in separation of church and state. Now, you'd hear a Protestant say the same thing, wouldn't you? Separation of church and state. But there's a difference in the Protestant understanding of the separation of church and state than there is with the Roman Catholic definition of separation of church and state. In Roman Catholicism, whenever you hear a Roman Catholic or a canonist, someone who is trained in Roman Catholic canon law, which theoretically every Roman Catholic is, when they make reference to the separation of church and state, it means this and only this: that the state may not touch any aspect of the Roman Catholic Church or its priests or its pope. The papacy and its priests are immune from the civil power. Okay? That's where separation of church and state begins and ends from a Roman Catholic canon law point of view. They're separate, but the Pope not only is immune to the civil law, and his priests are immune to the civil law, his bishops, his cardinals, his archbishops, all who derive their power from the Pope in spiritual things, is immune from the civil power. But what they don't tell you is that they are separate because the Pope and his priests are higher, have more authority. They are the ultimate authority. And that the civil power is subservient to the Pope and to the priests. That's why it can't judge or bring an offense against a priest. That's why they're immune. The civil power, according to Roman Catholic canon law, is completely out of its league to try to remove a speck from the Pope's eye or in the eye of one of his priests. It's not morally, it doesn't have the moral wherewithal to question the deity of the world. But it is every prerogative of the Pope to instruct the people and to hold in subservience the government. All right? So the separation is that the state may not intrude upon the rights of the Pope and the priest, but the popes and the priests have every obligation to hold in subjection the civil power and to make it rise to the Pope's standard. Okay, to be the defender of Roman Catholic canon law, to be the enforcer of Roman Catholic canon law. You see, to the civil power, the doors of Rome are closed shut, but you may not close, the civil government may never close the door from the free entrance of the Pope and the priests. Okay, so it's only separate in one direction. Now that's contrary to any Protestant understanding of the separation of church and state, but be reminded that every Roman Catholic uses the same term as Protestants with a completely different understanding of those terms. All right. So the state inspector is not allowed to cross the threshold of a Roman Catholic educational institution or a a parish priest's residence or a church. The civil government has no jurisdiction over the quote-unquote spiritual. But these same priests can dictate to the government. And that's what their schools, their colleges, and particularly their Jesuit colleges and universities and high schools are directed to do. To educate canonists, that is, those who are expert in Roman Catholic canon law, and then put them in the government. That's to make the government Catholic and to subject all the citizens of the country to Roman Catholic canon law. See, there's no separation of church and state in that respect. So you can see facts on the ground, the implementation of the separation of church and state as understood by Roman Catholic canon law. The state can't question the priests, but they are in the total business of putting Roman Catholics in the government in every position of authority in this country. The military, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is completely dominated by Roman Catholics. So is Congress. And I maintain, of course, many people roll their eyes and think I've gone too far with this, but Barack Obama is a canonist. Okay, he was groomed by Jesuit priests, and he was put in office in this country and given a fictitious name to give the people the dumb impression that he's Muslim. And he's even acted out that little charade to the convincing of the whole nation that he's Muslim, but he serves the Pope. Okay? So it's a Roman Catholic government. And we have Roman Catholic schools. And to the degree that the Jesuits have been able to infiltrate the Protestant churches, they're Roman Catholic churches. And what makes them Roman Catholic? They teach futurism. Not that the Pope is the Antichrist, that's the Protestant teaching. Not that the papacy is the Antichrist, that's a Protestant teaching. They teach futurism. That the Antichrist is a single individual that hasn't even arrived on the world scene yet. When the actual fact is that the papacy, the real Antichrist of the Bible, the historical Antichrist, one who's reigned over the kings of the earth for 1,500 years, is reigning over this country too. And has made us all Catholic without our understanding. And as much as we claim Protestantism or evangelicalism or whatever you want to claim, the claim can't be very sincere if every law to which you abide in this country is written under Roman Catholic canon law. I mean, the Trojan horse has long come into this country, and the invading crusaders have dismounted and taken over the country long ago. And the very things that James A. Wiley is fearful of for Britain took place without a struggle in this country. Where is the Protestantism? It's gone. For all practical purposes, you have Inquisition Update, you have Cross the Border, you probably have, dozens of other true Protestant ministries in this country, but what voice do they have? What influence do they have? Only over a chosen few. That's my estimation of things. Now, back to the subject of Roman Catholic education. Rome loves to champion her adeptness at training, at education. So James A. Wiley says, in the first full paragraph on page 136, he says, if the Church of Rome is now sincerely set on educating the masses, let her begin at home. There's room in Italy for all of her money and for all of her efforts. Let her discard the catechisms, which are her textbooks, and introduce something like rational knowledge. Or if, leaving Italy and other countries to barbarism, she must play the educationist in Great Britain, let her do so in the schools open to the inspection of the public, that so we may know that she is not teaching anti-national and demoralizing doctrines in them, and making them the mere nurseries of a church whose dominion has all along been as fatal to knowledge as the liberty of man, as to the liberty of mankind. All right, there's a challenge for Rome. If you truly be about education, then open your doors for public inspection. Throw away the catechism and all of your Roman Catholic dogmas and start teaching real knowledge that can raise up the people. Teach them how to read. Okay? Teach them how to read the Bible. That would be great. Rome's never going to do it. Never, ever, ever going to do it. Rome thrives on ignorance. Rome thrives on darkness. And that's precisely what James A. Wiley is telling us. Now, he's going to give us an example here of the domineering quality, the tyranny of Romanism. This next portion of the book is entitled Franzoni and Santa Rosa, or Rome's Spiritual Discipline. In the autumn of 1850, a conflict broke out in Piedmont between the civil and the ecclesiastical authorities. Remember we were talking about church and state before? Well, this is a case where church and state were at odds with one another. And in a Roman Catholic country, but a Roman Catholic country called Piedmont, which was previously occupied by true Bible-believing Christians called the Waldenses. Okay? They had a copy of the real scriptures in their own language, and they would never bend the knee to the papacy. So the papacy sent the kings surrounding the Waldenses, the kings of Piedmont and surrounding provinces of Italy, to completely rout them out. And we've talked about that many times here on Inquisition Update. The History of the Waldenses by James A. Wiley is a highly recommended work. Okay, but after the Piedmontese, or the Waldenses, had been routed out of the Alps in Piedmont, they were replaced with papists. All right? And in 1850, there broke out in Piedmont, between the civil and the ecclesiastical authorities, or we should rather say, between the courts of Turin and Rome, which is well worth the attention and study of intelligent men. It presents us with a nice, manageable plot, not so large as to distract the attention, and yet large enough to permit a proper display of the character of popery. We here behold that system with saucy I'm having trouble today for some reason. We here behold that system with saucy impudence and unbearable arrogance advancing pretensions, which in countries like ours it effects to explain away or altogether to disavow. In other words, there's something going on in Piedmont that we would just choose to ignore. But listen how this goes. He says, in short, there is here exhibited on a small scale what, when transacted on the scale of other days, convulsed Europe to its center and prostrated its most puissant kings before the power of the mitre. Okay? It's very instructive what we're about to read. He says this, now remember, this is a Roman Catholic government in Piedmont, having destroyed the Waldenses centuries ago. And this Roman Catholic government in Piedmont is having a problem with Rome. Okay? A little infighting going on here. And he says this conflict, intelligently viewed, reads most emphatically the lesson that in every condition and in all ages, popery is the same restless, intriguing, and malignant principle. No reverse can subdue, as no concession can mollify its intolerant and tyrannical spirit. Though humbled in the dust one moment, and seemingly a poor, pitiful, cringing thing, it is the next day as ready as ever to set its foot upon the neck of kings, and to strangle in its grasp the liberties of nations. You cannot break its pride. Do to it what you will, nor satisfy its ambition by any amount of power and dominion whatsoever. Chase it to the dungeons, strip it of all its possessions, still, with the poverty of Lazarus, it will continue the pride of Lucifer. Thrust scepters into its hand, heap diadems upon its head, it will clamor for more power and strive avariciously to grasp more wealth. Leave it to itself, and not a vestige of liberty will it suffer to exist. While a single right of a single human being remains uninvaded, it will not cease to plot. Such a principle you cannot regulate, you cannot reform, amen, you cannot restrain, you can only destroy it, and destroy it you must if you would save society or give peace to the world. That's what James A. Wiley thinks of popery. That's what Inquisition Update thinks of popery. And what is the hideous reality? That Protestants are no longer Protestants and are completely incapable of even engaging that enemy, let alone destroying it. It cannot be reformed. You can't negotiate with it. You can't make excuses for it. You can't consider yourself equal to it or it equal with you. It is going to dominate. It's going to use every means in its power, fair or foul, to conquer the whole world for the Pope. You can't reform it. You can't negotiate with it. If you think anything of liberty and peace, you must destroy it. Utterly destroy it. Now, I'm not talking an armed confrontation. The only way to destroy Romanism, popery, the Antichrist church, is with the truth. Preached from every high point. Preached from every lowly street corner. Preached in every institution of learning. To show side by side the liberty of Protestantism in the Bible and Christ against that of the tyranny of the papacy. And since no time in the world has this ever been done, it's now evident to humanity, it should be evident to humanity, that the only way that this Antichrist beast in Rome is going to be destroyed is when Christ returns. And he'll do the battle for us. Until then, we will suffer. As much as Rome can make us suffer, and as little help as Protestantism is to us, Rome is going to make us suffer. To the degree that the Protestant churches have become futurist, we will suffer under Roman tyranny. That's our lot. We're happy to have the idolatrous Church of Rome erect her images and idols all over the country, and we live under a false hope that they won't tyrannize us if given an opportunity. Now you know why the righteous kings of Israel break down all the groves and all the images and all the idols of the pagans. But we don't have as much courage as those righteous kings of Israel. If we're allowing those images and idols and groves and occultism to invade the righteous truths of Israel, the God of Israel, and to corrupt their worship, that's the degree to which they became totally enslaved in Babylon, a pagan country. Well, we're even worse than Israel was. We haven't been banished to a Babylonian captivity. We haven't been uprooted from our homes and been forced to travel hundreds of miles to a foreign pagan land and to serve a pagan king. We've invited Nebuchadnezzar here to take up his abode in our country and to make us slaves in our own houses. It doesn't get much worse. Until we come to the understanding that James A. Wiley is trying to give us of popery, we're going to be enslaved. He says this conflict, intelligently viewed, reads most emphatically the lesson that in every condition and in all ages, including ours, popery is the same restless, intriguing, and malignant principle. No reverse can subdue, as no concession can mollify its intolerant and tyrannical spirit. Though humbled in the dust one moment and seemingly a poor, pitiful, cringing thing, it is the next moment as ready as ever to set its foot upon the neck of kings and to strangle in its grasp the liberties of nations. You cannot break its pride, do to it what you will, nor satisfy its ambition by any amount of power and dominion whatsoever. Chase it to the dungeons, strip it of all its possessions, still, with the poverty of Lazarus, it will combine its strength with the pride of Lucifer. You thrust scepters into its hand and heap diadems upon its head, it will clamor for more power and strive avariciously to grasp more wealth. Leave it to itself, and not a vestige of liberty will it suffer to exist. Okay? That's what we've done in this country. We've left Roman Catholicism to itself. You leave it to itself, and not a vestige of liberty will it suffer to exist. Are you losing your liberties in this country? He says, while a single right of a single human being remains uninvaded, it will not cease to plot against that liberty. Liberty to a Roman Catholic means you are a subject of the Roman Pontiff. That's what it means to a papist to be free. You're free to be Roman Catholic. You're free to do what your priest tells you to do. You are free not to think, but to do what you are instructed to do. You are to be a mindless robot. You are not to read the Bible particularly. You are not to read anything unless it is handed to you by the priest. You're not to think for yourself. You're not to have your own conscience. Your conscience is developed by Roman Catholic canon law as given to you spoon-fed by the priest in the church. You must come to Mass and crucify Christ afresh every day. You must confess your sins to a priest and gain absolution from him because he's your God. Okay? That's what James A. Wiley's telling you. Such a principle, that is the Roman Catholic principle, you cannot regulate, you cannot reform, and this is the reality that sank in finally to the Protestant reformers. After they thoroughly read and understood their scriptures, they understood that church would never be reformed. It's not in the cards, if you'll pardon my expression. Bible prophecy clearly teaches us that Rome will persevere until Christ returns, or until the kingdom of Christ stands up and puts an end to this abomination. You cannot reform, you cannot restrain, and you can only destroy it. And destroy it you must if you would save society or give peace to the world. Do we have peace in the world? Nothing but war. Because we've left Rome on our own. We don't protest anymore. We don't know who the Antichrist is. He hasn't come yet. And we war against those who insist the papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist of the Bible. We'll continue on the program tomorrow. Thanks for listening. We'll see you then.